It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Will Johnston, who has come all the way from Vancouver to be here tonight. Will Johnston is a family physician in Vancouver and the president of Canadian Physicians for Life, a flourishing organization that, among other things, educates medical students in the realities of abortion at its annual conference. And it pulls in quite a goodly number of students in medical school to that conference. Dr. Johnston has spoken and written widely on the subjects of abortion and euthanasia. He is also the chair of the BC Coalition for the Prevention of Euthanasia, and he knew Dr. Barrie deVeber very well. So I'm sure we're going to find his comments very interesting. Will.
The younger generation are coming on board at Physicians for Life, and I'm very grateful for that, because we're actually a very small community in Canada. We have a funny country, and when I was a kid, I was reminiscing at dinner about how my father moved the family to Montreal so we could attend, we could be at Expo 67. He could easily get a job there, so he moved us to Montreal, and every weekend we went to Expo. And there was a great sense of optimism about Canada. The century was only two-thirds gone, and there was much talk, grandiose talk about this being Canada's century. And there was a sense of where the country had come from. And I'd have to say that in the 50 or so years that have passed, that the at least ethical and philosophical foundations that I thought Canada had have radically altered. And I'm going to touch on that a bit in my talk, which if it runs on too long, start clearing your throat, Ian. And I'll touch on a few themes. But to begin, good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may be so binary and lacking in nuance, we have gathered to honor the memory of Barrie deVeber and remember how he and his friends foresaw in 1982 that the simple cause of created human life and the freedom to speak the simple truth about it would need help. This institution was dedicated to the concept of a person as always an end in herself or in himself, never as a means. And it began at once to research the dire effects of abortion on women and on everybody. More recently, euthanasia received the Institute's attention. As you and I are painfully aware, human life in Canada is far from being uniformly honored for its own sacred existence and is ever more profoundly disregarded when it is eligible to be aborted and when it is eligible to be euthanized, all with the most meticulous legal propriety, of course. Our city government is very pro-life, for plant life, that is. A tree on your property right there in your yard, maybe you planted it, watered it, it's only there because you grew it, can't be cut down without a permit. It might be your tree, but killing it is not just a private matter between you and your arborist. Children, completely alive but unborn, are just not seen that way. Maybe they matter less than trees to some people. So what do people really need? We need to know that we are loved. We need a sense of purpose. We need a sense of control over our lives. The Judeo-Christian mind, which has been thousands of years in the making, gives us to understand that our most profound sense of control is in the act of trusting God. The most compelling sense of purpose we can possess involves learning and acting on the revealed love and will of God. The most secure knowledge we can trust is that we are loved by God to that infinite extent which we are incapable of matching out of our own resources. We are told in our tradition to love God with heart, mind, and strength, and to love others as ourselves. On these two principles, we are told, hang all the law and the prophets. If we are the heirs of this tradition, we daily march forth with those words resounding into a world which flatters itself constantly and in vain. It flatters itself that it cares about the poor, but doesn't care about the beliefs and attitudes which can lift the poor out of poverty. It flatters itself that arranging the death of the unborn child will give freedom to women without a terrible price to pay. It flatters itself that it can make death into a party trick and domesticate the great milestones of life so that scheduled euthanasia can replace untimed death, just like scheduled cesarean sections can replace healthy childbirth. We are the privileged spectators at a great human parade, but we sense an unfolding prelude to an unfolding disaster all around us. Anxiety racks our culture, especially among the young. High school counselors tell me that the incidence of anxiety has increased at least 50% in the last 10 years. In tandem with a similar increase in school avoidance, especially among girls, perhaps worst in grade 9. Our mental health system does not have the capacity to absorb this avalanche of dysfunction. How perverse that euthanasia for the unhappy is being promoted at such a time. Our society is becoming Darwinism on steroids. Survival of the fittest, where all the unwanted children are unfit and all the unhappy people are unfit. If this is not working out as well as was planned, it must be that we need to double down on the celebration of abortion and access to abortion while expanding the criteria for euthanasia. Once Belgian and Dutch people sign requests for euthanasia early in a dementing illness, they lose the right to change their minds further into their illness. Forced euthanasia, once someone else has decided the time is right, has not been punished. And there was a recent case of this. The woman had to be held down when she woke up from the initial sedation and struggled against having the intravenous put in and struggled against what they were doing to her. You paint the bullseye on your own back under the new regime. And when you finally forget it's there, you've lost the right to remove it. I asked lawyer Joe Arve why he was so involved in promoting euthanasia, and he is the fellow that won the Carter case at the Supreme Court, and which led on to our euthanasia law. I asked Joe why he was so involved in promoting euthanasia, and he replied that he had watched his mother with dementia, quote, curled up in the fetal position for 3 or 4 years, unquote, and, quote, I thought there must be a better way, unquote. So I would question whether euthanasia of the cognitively disabled was in the plans of Joe Arve and the BC Civil Liberties Association right from the start of their successful campaign to legalize euthanasia for cognitively intact people. All the same arguments seem to work. In the early 1990s, I talked to Dutch euthanasia pioneer Dr. Peter Admiraal, who provided euthanasia when it was against the law. He warned me that only the threat of prosecution was keeping euthanasia under control and focused on people who were appropriate candidates, in his opinion. If euthanasia is ever fully legalized, he predicted, it would be uncontrollable and used on people it was never meant for. And this from the very anesthesiologist who softened the resistance to medical killing in Holland. He truly was the pioneer. So on the surface, it looks like the deVeber Institute and every other like-minded group are failing utterly